Ah, the 1990s. Who could forget Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Batman Forever, Toy Story, the dawn of the personal computer and the internet? It was so wonderful. It was so perfect. But was it really? Hi everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, 20th Century Man. This is Christian, and if you're new here, please subscribe, which I'm sure a lot of you will be new. So, what makes me qualified to even consider the question? Was the 90s that great? Was it better in the 90s? Well, I was born at the beginning of the decade, so the majority of my childhood really did take place in the 90s. That gives me a very unique perspective. So my perspective on the 1990s is through a child's view, not as an adult or a teenager. Technically, anyone can answer the question or ask the question, and I guess you can get an answer from anyone, but I want to give you my perspective on it. Keep in mind, like I said, I was a child. I wasn't a teenager. I wasn't an adult yet. So I can only give you a child's perspective on the decade. And I lived in a fairly rural area. So if you grew up in a large city, your experience might be very different than mine. I just want to give you my honest take on the decade. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail here because I don't want to spoil future episodes, but my earliest memories of television were very different from what a child today would experience. For one, we had an antenna. And this wasn't some little rabbit ear antenna like you see in the cartoons. This was one of those that was mounted outside of the house. And we only got 3, sometimes 4 TV channels. And to change the channel, you had to actually go outside and physically turn the antenna until the station came in clear that you wanted to see. The TV itself, this wasn't some modern flat screen. This was a big TV that sat on the floor that looked like a piece of furniture, and it probably weighed well over 100 pounds. My earliest memories were shows like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, The Joy of Painting, The Reading Rainbow, and sometimes Barney. Around age 5, we switched to satellite TV. Cable wasn't in our area yet, and I really don't even know if it still is. That's where my childhood memories really start to come in clearly. That's when I discovered Nickelodeon. The Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Rocko's Modern Life, Doug, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Kenan and Kel. And for movies, there's one that sticks out in my head above anything else, and that would be Toy Story. As far as actual movies go, one sticks out in my head more than any of the others, and that would be Toy Story because it really changed things. I went to the theater with my family to see this movie, and not only did I love it because the storyline is relatable, all kids have a very active imagination, and you typically play with toys as a child. And to see a movie about toys that come to life when you're not around was very fascinating. I loved it. And not only that, the animation style was completely different. Up until that point, the only sorts of cartoons I had seen were things like Lion King, The Little Mermaid, Bambi, 2D animation. And if I'm right, I believe Toy Story was the very first full-length animated series. It really did blow my mind as a kid. Another thing about the 90s was the lack of cell phones. And before people in the comments start saying, well, yes, there was cell phones. Yes, I do know that. But in the mid-90s, in a rural area where I lived, they weren't common. I only knew one person in my whole family that had a car phone, and that was my uncle. I didn't personally know anyone that had a cell phone. I remember this one time, we ran out of gas. We were about 2 miles from home. We had someone at home that could have brought us a gas jug, but we didn't have a cell phone. So we had to walk in the hot July heat in the south for 2 miles to get home to get the gas jug. those are the sorts of memories that, what I think of the 90s, that's what pops in my head. It wasn't fun at the time, but it's almost sort of fun to look back on. And today, all you would have to do is make a phone call or send out a text or an instant message, and someone would be on their way to come get you or bring you gas. Very convenient. In the mid to late 90s, the big craze wasn't smartphones or social media yet. It was computers and the internet itself. That was the latest and greatest technology at the time. And I heard about it nonstop. There were commercials. It was in movies. I remember in kindergarten, during the second half of the year, we finally got a computer in each classroom with internet capabilities. The first half of the school year, there was lines, telephone lines running everywhere, trying to get us ready to have a computer in every classroom. My kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Johnson, made a huge deal about it. She said this would change the way we learn, that we'd never have a reason to not know something again, because as long as we had a computer with internet access, we'd be able to learn anything we wanted. And maybe because she was so fascinated by it, maybe that's why I was so impressed with it, because she made such a big deal out of it. We have no reason not to know things when we have the whole world of information at our fingertips. Outdoor play was also something that was very common in the 90s. I remember after I ate in the morning, I was outside. Not because someone made me, but because that's just what kids did. I remember my brother and cousin and I would be outside. We would play like hide and seek, play in the mud, play in the woods, making little clubhouses. I remember one time we even had a small metal case that we filled with change, and we buried it in the ground. And to this day, that money's still there somewhere. Then in the evening, that's when we started to play video games. My introduction to video games happened fairly early in my life. This must have been around 1994 or 1995 when my family bought a Super Nintendo. It came with the classic combo pack Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3, plus the Lost levels, and, to me, the greatest video game of all time, Super Mario World. We played Super Mario World a lot in my house. Later we added Donkey Kong Country, then Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3. And my grandmother, since they purchased the system for themselves, we just got to play also. My grandmother was really a good player at Super Nintendo. She really loved Super Mario World, and we played that a lot together. She actually taught me how to play. And as a little side note, if you're a fan of Young Sheldon, there's an episode where Sheldon talks about playing video games with his grandmother when he was a kid. And that episode always sticks out to me, and it means a lot to me because it reminds me so much of my own childhood. It's about a child that lives in the South that's very close to his grandmother, and they were playing video games. So, that's one of my favorite episodes. Holidays were a very big deal in my family, and nothing signaled the beginning of Christmas like watching Home Alone 1 and 2. Usually, this happened on Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving Day, we'd watch Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Then we would eat, and then one of those 4 channels that we got would play Home Alone 1, and then sometimes Home Alone 2. Some of my best memories of childhood are right there in front of the TV with my family, watching those movies. Everyone laughed. Everyone really loved them in my family. And honestly, is there anyone that doesn't like Home Alone? During school, most days I was given 50 cents to buy a drink at recess. Nowadays, giving your kids money for soda might seem crazy, but back then, this was completely normal. The machines usually had things like Sprite, Coke, Dr. Pepper, root beer. And my favorite, Surge. There wasn't bottled water in these machines, or juice. One day, I brought a can home, and my grandmother realized why I was having trouble sleeping. She laughed and told me I couldn't drink that, I was basically drinking an energy drink. Looking back, that was one of those small but hilarious 90s moments. It also wouldn't be totally fair if I didn't mention language in elementary school. I started school in the mid-90s. The teachers weren't trying to be mean. They weren't trying to be offensive. That was just the language that was in use at the time. Now, a few years later, by the time I was in high school, saying the same words would have been completely unacceptable. If I had said them in high school, I might have had detention. I could have been suspended for a day. But I wanted to include this because I want to make this series as transparent and honest as possible. We said words back then that wouldn't be okay to say today, especially in a classroom setting. And I include that just because I want to illustrate clearly the environment that I grew up in. Millions of us grew up in. So now the question is, were the 90s really better? And from a child's perspective, yeah, I would say it was, in a lot of ways. Not all, but a lot of ways. I would say I was raised in a more innocent world. Overall, there weren't many commercials then for contraceptives, ED medication, and just commercials celebrating sexuality, regardless of what it is. That wasn't a thing. So I was very unaware of sexuality at all as a child. This wasn't a thing that ever crossed my mind until nature took its course on me. And I would say the way I should think about this as a closing for this episode, were the 90s better? And that really just depends on who you are, what your perspective might be, and who you might ask, and at what stage of life that you lived the 90s. And I would say as a child, the 90s were good. There was plenty of good entertainment for us. There was still this whole mystery and wonder of the internet and computers that really just captivated an entire generation. And I guess another way to put it would be, if I had a time machine, would I go back to the 90s? And I would say yes, and that's just because I had a family then. I had a complete family. I had a mom and dad, a grandma and a grandpa, an aunt and an uncle. And fast forward 30 years later, I only have my mom left. Everybody else is gone. So I would go back just for my family, just to spend time with them again. But if you take the family out of the equation, I would go back, but more like a vacation. I might stay a week or two, just because, there wasn't, just for the fun of it, for the simplicity of the time. Now, at the time, it didn't seem like a simple time. It seemed like a very cutting-edge time. But to go back to live, if the family wasn't part of the equation, no. But I would like to visit. I would say the standard of living, for myself at least, is so much higher than what it was in the 90s. When I started off my life here, like I said, we only had the one TV in the living room. We had an antenna, so if you wanted to change stations, you had to go outside, rain or shine, hot or cold. Today, I have a TV in the living room still, but now I have TVs in all 3 bedrooms in the house. And as a child, if I had known that, I would think that we were rich. Having high-speed internet at this house now, which I haven't had for very long, is a godsend. It's amazing. And having access to all these shows at the click of a button would have felt like science fiction. So were the 90s better? For me, yes, in a lot of ways. But there are a lot of things that I like about today. And I would like to hear your thoughts and opinions on this in the comments, please. If you had a time machine, would you go back and live in the 90s? Would you go back to visit? Would you not go back at all? And if you weren't there, how do you feel about it? I would like to know about the younger generation, how they feel. Well, that's all I really have for this episode today. And if you enjoy it, Please stick around. I have lots and lots of more videos to come. And again, thank you. I'm Christian, and this is 20th Century Man. Until next time.